Welcome to the Modern Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Lyles Carr, and sometimes you just get an opportunity to make a friend when you never even saw it coming, and then that person's voice just becomes more important in your life than you ever could have dreamed. Well, that's my friend today, Jen Fulwiler. She is a very popular radio host on SiriusXM. She's an author, and she is a mom of 6. So when she and I have a chance to get together and talk, we have a lot to talk about. And so today, I just want us to take a moment to really explore something really cool with Jen that she learned in her pathway to motherhood, which was that you can still have all those amazing dreams and all those babies. Welcome to the podcast, Jen.
Julie, I am so excited to join you. I love the work that you're doing, so this is really a thrill for me.
Well, I'm thrilled with the work you're doing, and I feel so fortunate that we are both in Austin, Texas. We happened to meet when my publisher, who also happens to be Jen's publisher, set us up for a radio interview in which I was the guest. This was on SiriusXM Channel 129, where Jen has a daily radio show. And so she and I got to meet for the first time behind microphones. And then we got to be more and more in contact, and it's just been so fun to see your journey with your book that's coming out. Also, One Beautiful Dream. When's the release date?
May 1st. Very exciting.
So how has the pregnancy with this book been?
It was rough. Very, very heavy morning sickness. So this was a rough one. It's fun now, but having 6 kids, and we homeschool, and, we have all this craziness going on. So having 6 kids and a radio show where I'm on the air every day, 2 hours a day, this was truly a lesson for me that God does not call the equipped, He equips the called. Julie, when I started out on this journey and I signed the contract with this book, I had prayed about it. My husband and I together prayed about it. We prayed as a family. It felt right. This seemed to be where God was calling me. But at the beginning of this journey, I just looked at my schedule and everything, and I said, Lord, there's no way I can write this book. There's no way I can get this done. So it was quite a journey, and I will not say that it was always a smooth journey. There are a lot of ups and downs.
So I am so thrilled for this book to come to market because I think that it really is going to talk to women right where they live. I think a lot of times in my conversations with women who are actively mothering, but also have these dreams for careers, they often feel like they're having to choose between the kid lane, the kid dream, the family dream, or the career dream, or they feel guilty that they're trying to incorporate both. So talk a little bit about the path you've been on, because you are an only child. You did not start out thinking, oh yeah, I want to have a passel of kids. And right. You had a very different vision, a different dream for your life originally. What was that dream?
So, I was raised atheist, always had that atheistic background, very much fell into this. Basically, in a way, even when I was an atheist, I had a religion, Julie, and that was the religion of worldly success, career, things like that. And so I thought that was going to be my life. I didn't care about marriage. I definitely didn't want kids, because I thought that the way you have a good life is to just throw yourself into some kind of career, focus on yourself, travel. And honestly, I thought that was kind of the trinity of life. That's what you do to have a good life.
And so you began chasing that hard.
I did, yeah.
And then what intersected your path?
So God is the short version. Yeah. And, and I won't say that I was miserable, because traveling to the Argentinian wine country and sipping their wine as I look over the Andes Mountains, it wasn't terrible, Julie. But there was almost this addiction to that sort of pleasure. It's like I'd be sitting in Argentina sipping wine, but then I'd have to be calculating what's the next exotic experience I'm going to have. And so very, very, very long story made short, I started seeking God. Some events led me to do that, and I became a Christian. And then finally I had that sense that I didn't need to always be chasing the next experience, the next high. But, I fell into some circles where I absorbed the message, and I don't know if people were really saying this or not, but I absorbed the message once I started having kids that it's time to put my dreams on the shelf, that all of those ideas I might have had about being a writer or starting a podcast or whatever it might be, that those were my old worldly ways. And as a godly woman, I needed to set all of that aside and not have a second thought about anything that occurred outside of my kitchen or my living room. And I really absorbed that message.
And so how did that go? Putting yourself on pause, putting all of that on hold, and focusing on those little ones.
Yeah, well, it was interesting that part of that message definitely contained truth. The idea that our life priorities should be God, then family, then everything else. It was very clear to me that this is wisdom, this is truth. Now, the details, the day-to-day execution, I did not have peace with because I was setting all of these things aside. But a wise and holy woman who I was connected with during this time said, you need to check the litmus test of this. Do you have peace? How is this impacting your family? We know that God wants us to put the people he sent into our lives, our families, to put them first. So how is putting your dreams on hold impacting your family? And I realized, I'm not sure that this is actually a positive thing because I feel stifled. I feel like I have this energy within me that I would just be so enlivened if I could share it. And it is actually taking a lot of work on my part to stuff this down. It's like this force that wants to explode. And it's actually wearing me out, stuffing this down and keeping it from exploding all the time. It finally occurred to me after talking with my husband, and I talked to our pastor about this, maybe this is actually not even good for my family, that I'm taking these desires that are within me and putting them all on hold.
I was reading some statistics that how we have basically rendered modern homemaking, modern mothering, it's actually somewhat more complicated than it has been in the past, which sounds strange because you're thinking, well, now we have dishwashers and now we have, washing machines and dryers and we have modern conveniences. However, if you really look at the stats, most of our homes are about 3 to 4 times larger than homes used to be back, in the 1800s, early 1900s. Our wardrobes have expanded like crazy. So somebody's having to curate and monitor and maintain those wardrobes. Dishes, you might used to have had a dish per family member, and now we have a gajillion dishes per family member, a set for Christmas and a set for Thanksgiving and a set for Easter and the nice dishes and the everyday dishes and all the things. When you look at the amount of stuff that we are now asking women to be over if they're going to be home and be homemakers, we really have actually made the job in many ways harder than it was back in the day. And believe me,
Amen.
when I look at Mike's, grandmother with her gajillions of children, like our gajillions of children, having to hand wash out in the yard and all that, I'm not saying that was not hard. It was. But even with all of our modern conveniences, we've complicated it, and then somehow we think that in all that complication, there's some virtue to put something on hold and put on the shelf. I mean, you began to look at those patterns as well, as you talk about in your new book, One Beautiful Dream. You began to realize that maybe some of our modern rendition and definition of being home, being focused on family, is maybe based on an inaccurate template.
You are. I wish people could see my face. I'm sitting here like, amen, amen, amen. You are speaking my language. So let's not just look at the physical things that are more difficult, just having more stuff, a bigger house to take care of. Again, I thank God every day for my washing machine and dishwasher. I don't want to be out with the washboard and lye soap. But there are things that are harder, and there are things that are psychologically much more difficult than our grandmothers and great-grandmothers had this. And Julie, just as part of a family history thing, I had the pleasure quite a few years ago of interviewing both male and female relatives who were close to age 100. So these were people who were born at the very beginning of the 1900s. And they confirmed for me that while their lives were in many ways much harder physically, they were psychologically easier with certain setups. So let me give you an example. Mothers from time immemorial have had refuge in the sanity-saving phrase, go outside. The farm mothers had that. With moms who live in tribal villages in countries today where people still live in close-knit tribes. My mom's mother had that. Growing up, my mom grew up in the 1950s in a suburban area, and she said, my mom didn't see us that often because we would come home from school and we would jump on our bikes. And the rule was when the streetlights come on, we come back home. When I was a kid, that was, I would go around on my bike, and when the streetlights came on, I had to be back home. You'd be arrested if you let your kids do that today. And when you look at the way women raised children in any other generation, any time and place in history other than today, the modern age, you see women who were not doing this alone. Either they had, again, tribal communities looking way back in history and in certain parts of the world, or they just let their kids be outside all the time. I mean, my grandfather, who, God rest his soul, lived to age 100, he said, my mama didn't see us that much. We were either at school or in the summers, we would get up, have a quick breakfast, and we were gone. And she had to ring the dinner bell to get us back in. We don't have that anymore, Julie. And this is the message that I so want our fellow mothers out there who are listening to understand. It is psychologically very unnatural and very stressful to raise children on your own. God did not design us for this. We were not meant to do it. We were meant to have help either in the form of other women in our families or in our communities, or just in being able to let them roam outside. And being stuck in the house 24/7, you have to have eyes on your kids 24/7. This is very unnatural and it is very stressful.
I think one of the messages that for some reason I carried into my early mothering, and I don't even know where this came from, because I badly wanted to be home with my children. I walked away from a career in radio and television in order to be with them, and was so thankful and glad to be with them. But I found myself feeling like my mission was to entertain them.
Yes.
I don't know where I got that. And I do think some of the entertainment's good, because at least you got eyeballs on them and you know that they're not... Well, later, by the time I was up to kids 7 and 8, I did have that moment where I walked in the guest bathroom and Jake, my baby, had been very quietly and peacefully dunking. I don't know. I'm going to estimate here, but probably 30 rolls of toilet paper.
Oh, we do that too. Yes, we do that in our house,
into the
Julie.
toilet.
Yes,
and he had paper machéd. I'm talking paper machéd the entire guest bathroom. I mean, it looked like I had been trying to do some trompe l'oeil, plaster treatment. It was pretty amazing.
And that stuff is hard when it dries.
Right. Actually, I left it alone for a long time.
Yes, it's still your motif.
It's really great. Looks kind of Tuscan. I don't know.
Yeah, that's now his professional job. He'll paper mache your bathroom walls.
So, there's some risk involved when you let them free range a bit in the house. But I can remember when my oldest children were young, feeling like, okay, we did Play-Doh for a while. Now I've got to get out the Lincoln Logs. And I was trying in many ways to so monitor and create and constantly entertain them. And it was exhausting. And it was stifling. I can remember times, as crazy as I was about these kids, driving back down the hill to the house that we were, because this is a great thing, right? You always want to make sure you have one major house renovation that you do in early marriage with small children.
Of course. You don't know if it's a real marriage if you don't go through that.
Until you go through that. And I can remember driving back down the hill to that house after I would have snuck off to go to the grocery store or something and had my husband, there at the house with kiddos. And that sense of, I love these people so much. I'm so crazy about these people, but I almost feel like I can't breathe.
Yeah.
I don't think I have another round of Barbie in me right now.
Because I'm a major introvert, so I absolutely know that.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. And Julie, if I could just jump in to say one thing, because I'm so excited about what you're saying, to connect it back to what you were saying about our great-grandmothers, these women who didn't have dishwashers, who didn't have the washer and the dryer and all the vacuums, all these modern conveniences. They didn't have time to play entertainment director to their children. This is not a historical thing that mothers have typically done, because they didn't have time. Just the work of survival was mostly what they did during the day.
It's interesting to me. We were going through my mom's house to get it cleaned out for her after we moved her from Oklahoma to Indiana to be close to one of my brothers. And a couple of the items that we found that I remembered afresh, I recognized them from my childhood because I'd seen them before, but my mom had her own little washboard.
Really? Oh my God.
And can you even imagine today? She had a little ironing board and an actual plug-in iron.
Oh, wow.
Child size. And she talked about, on wash day, I was right there with my mother. I had my stuff and they actually worked. And, she said I did a lot with
the little kids iron. My gosh. Well, wait a minute. Let's see if they sell those, Julie. Now, wait a minute.
I think I might be onto something. I need to start some kind of fund for that. GoFundMe.
Yeah. GoFundMe. Let's do it.
We'll be back in a hot minute with this awesome conversation with Jennifer Fulwiler. But first, want to make sure you're getting connected in community. And around here, we know one of the best ways to do that is through MOPS. For over 40 years, MOPS has been inviting women into community through the commonality of motherhood, building friendships, and earning the opportunity to share Jesus with them, maybe for the first time. MOPS believes that all moms are world influencers and exists to encourage and equip all moms everywhere to live their best lives. Check out mops.org to find a local gathering in your neighborhood. This is what I love that is so endemic throughout your entire book, your new book, One Beautiful Dream, is that it's not that we're saying family shouldn't take precedence.
Right.
At all. As a matter of fact, you and I share a very, absolutely on point heartbeat together that we have a huge responsibility to family. What we are saying, though, and what you just unpack so beautifully for us in this new book, is that it doesn't mean you have to do it by the template that is familiar and common within our culture today. So talk about breaking out of that template, what you and your husband, Joe, did to break out of the template that would primarily say, okay, you be home and put everything on pause, Joe go to the office, and here's how we're going to run life. And hey, if you're a listener and you love your life organized that way, that's fantastic. But if you're listening and you're thinking, yeah, I think might even could be a better mom if I had a little bit of wiggle room for something that just makes my pulse race a little bit. So what's the template that y'all busted the walls out on?
Yeah, and Julie, I'm so glad you included that, because that was one of my big messages in One Beautiful Dream, is that we all have to think outside of the box to find what works for us. So what works for me and Joe is not going to be, it shouldn't be what works for every single one of your listeners.
Right.
That's really my whole message, is think outside of the box, be creative. Don't do this because Julie's doing this, Jen's doing that.
Right.
You find what works for you. And so to give you the framework first that we approach this from is I just had this shattering realization that I had this idea that doing work that fulfills me and putting my family first are these opposite things. And I realized, no, this is a both and thing, that, the act of welcoming children into our home through adoption, through birth, however they come to us, this is a creative act. And so is creating whatever work that we feel we're called to create. And that these things naturally go hand in hand. They're not at all opposed to each other. So with that mindset, Joe and I said, we started small. I mean, I never intended to end up with a radio show or anything like that. But I said, Joe, I think that I would just be happier and would have more energy if I started taking this work that I feel called to do and I love to do. In my case, that was writing. And I said, I just think I'll have more to give back. And he said, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I said, look, I would like some dedicated time here that I don't have to feel guilty about, that I have a couple hours, maybe even per day, that even if the kids wake up early from their nap, I put them in front of a screen because that's my 2 hours to do my thing. And he said that makes so much sense. And Julie, the fruits that came from that, you would think that I had gotten on a medication, a good medication. And no joke. I mean, I know many people who have benefited from medication, so I've seen the transformation it can make. I was a different person. I was suddenly, instead of hitting alarm 6 times, hitting my snooze 6 times, I would jump out of bed ready to face the day. Not only did this work that I was doing not feel like work, it didn't add stress to my plate, it gave me energy. And this actually became so powerful in my life that Joe said, let's hire a babysitter so that you can focus on this a little more. And at this time, Julie, our budget we were paycheck to paycheck. I mean, things were really, really tight at this time. And I said, well, that doesn't make sense. And he said, we could probably find a teen girl down at church, to come for a pretty low rate. And, we're not talking about hiring a full-time Mary Poppins person, but just someone so that you can count on having this time. So we had to make some cuts. We decided we'd skip a dinner out, do an at-home date night once a month instead of going out. We'd cut back on groceries. And sure enough, I ended up finding a family friend, a 15-year-old girl who would come over and just keep the house from burning down while I would go up to my room. And it was tremendous what I was able to get done during that time. And then I ended up stumbling into making a little money from this, which ended up covering the babysitter and then some. And so that's kind of how things started. It really just started with this idea that maybe if I do this work that I feel God calling me to do and really feels right, maybe it would actually bless my family. Maybe this would not only not take away from them, but it would give me something more to give back to them.
You took a step of faith that's actually been hard for me to take. And it's something that I really was so inspired by when I got to read an advanced copy of One Beautiful Dream was you took yourself, and I love this because I know you, I know that this is not some ego thing or anything else, but you took yourself seriously first.
Yes.
In terms of you set up a dedicated desk space, you set up a calendar, you set up time, and I was like, wow, a lot of the things that I've been doing in the writing and the podcasting, like I've been trying to stuff it all into cracks that are the kind of the leftover areas. And the idea of taking that thing that God has laid on your heart that gives you such a pulse and taking it seriously first, instead of waiting for somebody else to take it seriously or to maybe put a little money behind it. I thought that was just absolutely inspired.
And well, yeah, I think it was inspired by God, Julie, because I didn't start out that way. I actually started off, you would have thought I was doing drugs, the way I was sneaking off in darkness and I'd write a little blog post and then I'd come back to my family as if I were a dog who just chewed up a shoe, with just shame, and I feel so guilty. And it was actually my husband's background. He has an MBA, so he's a big business guy. And he said to me at one point, he said, do you think that God is calling you to do this or not? He said, I think God's calling you to do it, but what do you think? And I said, oh, yes, I mean, this feels right. This seems to be part of his plan for my life. And he said, why are you doing this in shame? Why do you feel so ashamed of what God is calling you to do? I mean, if you think that this is his will for your life, why aren't you proud of that? Why don't you do this guilt-free and say, hey, yes, I did let the kids watch TV for 30 extra minutes. And I know that God has got this because he sent me this work. It feels right. I have peace with it. I'm open to feedback from other people, from my spouse. Everything about it feels right. And I'm going to own this. And I'm going to walk proudly in this call that he's given me. And it just, something just clicked that I thought, yeah, I mean, I give lip service to the idea that this feels right. I've discerned that this is where God's leading me. When else in our lives do we follow where God's leading us, but we do it in shame? Does that feel like that's from the Holy Spirit? And it was just this way of realizing I am honoring the fact that God has given me this call. I'm showing gratitude for it when I take it seriously and when I don't do it with a spirit of shame, but with a spirit of gratitude and joy. And that was a big turning point for me, Julie.
I have a really amazing friend who is a therapist, and she's been doing a lot of work with women in this shame lane.
Yeah.
Her name's Leslie Blay, and she's just amazing, a friend here in Austin. And one of the things that I so appreciate that she unpacks is it's really trying to get to the taproot of why do we even feel like shame is the appropriate response to something? And I know for a lot of us, we have these scripts that run through our heads of a good mother should.
Right. Yep.
And then if we're not. So what are some of those a good mother should scripts that may have been running through your head initially as you began to pursue this passion, this call that God had put on your heart? What were the things that were competing there?
So many messages. I mean, there were thousands, it felt like. A good mother should never let her children watch screens so that she can do something she enjoys. I mean, what kind of woman would do that? A good mother would never pay for household help, really, period, because obviously that means she's not checked into her home, but especially if she's not bringing in an income. Like, what are you, one of the Real Housewives? Like, what kind of woman would you be if you did that? A good mother puts her dreams on hold when her children are little, because that's what you're supposed to do. A good mother would never take a moment for herself if she's staying home with children, if the house isn't perfectly in order. I mean, it was one message after another, and I just started testing those and saying, wait, is this true? I mean, is that really so bad? Like, for example, if I've said today, okay, I'm going to take an hour and a half during nap time to write a blog post, to do some writing, and the kids wake up early, they wake up after 45 minutes, is that really that big of a deal to put on Barney so that I can finish that? Or am I just putting rules on myself that don't need to be there? And when I began testing these one by one, and again, seeking counsel, talking to my pastor, talking to my husband, I realized these messages are just false, and I'm just adding rules onto myself that don't need to be there. And I think part of the problem, Julie, is we're really in a new age of parenthood with our modern technology. Yep. I mean, the economy is totally different. You couldn't have an Etsy shop. You couldn't do the freelance writing that you and I have done. I know you've got all sorts of interesting work that you do. And 90% of this we could not have done 20 years ago, some of it not even 10 years ago. And so I think some of us feel a little bit lost because the reality is we are all pioneers. Our grandmothers, even our mothers, did not have these opportunities. We have no models. We have no one to turn to say, what do you do in an era of unprecedented opportunities? And so I think that's why many of us are putting rules on ourselves that don't need to be there and feeling a little lost because we're in new territory here.
Well, and to that point, we've been wanting to empower women who feel like, I love kiddos, I love focus on family, but I want to see if there's more I can explore. Now, the corollary is never before have we had work situations in which people at work have so much access to us.
Right.
And this has become something really interesting in the different lanes that God has me in, from the writing to the podcasting to the ministry work that I do, because there oftentimes, I'm at a lovely church with people I adore. But there seems to be, in ways that you would never have texted someone or called someone or whatever in the past and expected an answer so quickly, past 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right. Yep.
We now have this lane that we've opened up that says all access all the time. And, if I don't watch myself, even with the heartbeat I have for my family, for my kids, for my marriage, I could be working all the time.
All the time.
So, Jenna, what are some healthy health checks we can do? Because yes, with unprecedented opportunity also comes unprecedented access.
Yes. Oh, I love that question, Julie. One of the things I try to do, because I try to make daily prayer time a reality. That doesn't always happen when you've got a kid throwing up all night and you end up sleeping through morning prayer time. One thing I've been working on is on Sundays, truly not working. And that is something I will say of the past year that maybe when I had a book deadline, I think there was one Sunday where I just worked all day because I had this crazy deadline. But for the most part, I really have been good about enforcing I do not work on Sundays. And it generally doesn't matter what kind of deadline is coming up. And then I use that time to take a step back and remind myself what really matters, because the work that we do is wonderful. And I know you're having an impact. I know for our listeners who have work going on, they're having an impact, but that you can start to build that up in your mind. Like the world is just going to collapse if you don't get that thing done at that exact time. And so once a week, I try to use Sundays to take a step back, look at every single thing I'm stressed about. In fact, this past Sunday, I had to do this. I had a bunch of deadlines coming up this week. They were really starting to stress me out. And on Sunday, I just took some quiet time and said, how much does this really matter in the grand scheme of things? And quietly, calmly going through that, I was able to see, you know what? God and my family is what matters. And this work I do matters on a different level. I mean, it's great and it's nice, but it is not worth getting myself stressed out about. And when I do that, and I just am unapologetic about setting limits, I've had some people, who will email me. Let's say I haven't replied to an email in 24 hours and it's not really that urgent. And they're following up and saying, hey, Jen, where's your reply? I was expecting to hear from you. I will kindly but boldly reply and say, I have 6 kids. I'm really busy. Just to set your expectations correctly, it often takes me about 3 to 4 days to reply to an email. And I'm unapologetic about letting people know that. And so when I have those weekly moments of peace and getting my priorities in the right order, and then honestly training the people I work with a little bit to say, unless it is urgent, it will probably take 3 or 4 days for me to even reply to your text included in that. That honestly, I find that people very often, even in the business world, the response I get is, hey, that's cool. I respect that. I think I might start telling people that myself.
So you're setting expectation ahead of time.
And setting boundaries.
Right, and boundaries, which I think is really, really helpful. I think part of what I want to make sure, too, that we cover as well is I think we're going to see a different kind of mom shame begin, because we do live in an era in which you can have an Etsy shop, you can have an online presence, you can have a podcast, you can have all these things. I want moms to know that, what? If you are in a season of mothering and you don't feel like there's something more, and I use air quotes to put that up, that you're supposed to be doing, you know what? That is awesome and great and good. I worry sometimes that in an age of opportunity, we're going to send a message to women that being in the home and taking care of kiddos and caring for their homes well somehow isn't enough anymore.
Yes.
And I want to be very cautious we don't send that forth as well.
Yes. Yeah. I really want to affirm that God is going to use you if you just turn to him, no matter what your daily life looks like. If you're working out of the home, you're a lawyer going to an office, or you're quote unquote just staying home with kids, you don't have the Etsy shop, you don't have a writing career going on, God can work equally powerfully in both of those women. And I want to be clear, I had a woman when I was speaking come up to me afterwards and talk about my book and all that sort of thing. And she said, it's funny, you see this mom shame, mom guilt starting here. She said, oh gosh, Jen, I see what you're doing, and I guess I should be doing stuff like that. I guess I should too. And I said, no, honey, like this is, for me, it's not a should. This feels right. I think we've all experienced that when you're doing something that for now, God has called you to do it. His finger seems to be on it. It's enjoyable. You have that peace. It's not work. It's not pressure. I'm not doing the stuff that I do because I quote unquote should. It gives me energy. It fills me up, and I'm genuinely enjoying it. So if the thought of going and writing a book or doing an Etsy shop or speaking or knitting on a professional level or something like that, if that fills you with stress, then hey, that's a sign that God's like, not now, that this is not where I want you, and keep on keeping on with what you're doing. And don't ever buy into that pressure to, look at the people you're following on Instagram or on Facebook and start thinking all of these shoulds. That's going to ruin your life, and it's going to keep you from discerning the way God is calling to use you in your life right now. So do not ever use someone else's template and try to apply it to your own life. That's a recipe for disaster.
Well, and I think that it's so important when we look at someone else's template, we really don't know completely.
Right.
The price they've paid, the choices they have made. I think you and Joe, I love what you and Joe have built. You have built a way that both of you are able to be a little more present in the home, but he made some very sacrificial choices about his career in order to do that. You made some sacrificial choices yourself, and you built this thing together. My husband, Mike, works out of that, he works away from the home. He doesn't office at home very often at all. And he has very, very long days. And he, is often staying late or going to meetings or whatever, 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. And we've had to figure out our own way because you know what? That style of career is very fulfilling for him. And it doesn't make him a worse father than Joe or a better husband than so-and-so or whatever. It doesn't. These are just choices that we had to make along the way as well. And I think that's so important for people to know that comparison game gets you nowhere. You've got to look at where you're at, the kids God's given you, the spouse God has given you, the call God has given you, and determine those next steps with his leading and as best as you can.
And I would add to that one of the implications behind what you said is that you are, in the first place, turning to your spouse and partnering with your spouse. We live in a day and age when there's a message out there that marriage is kind of two people doing their own thing, and don't let your spouse get in your way of your ambitions, of your goals. And it's so important to see your family, your kids included, as your partners. When you find something that you love doing, don't look at your kids as an obstacle that you have to get over. Your husband, like how can I get him out of the way so that I can pursue my dreams? They are your partners. They are your team. And so with everything, even when I wasn't doing that much work on my own, but Joe had a law firm, we saw that as our thing. We decided together what kind of work he'll do, what sort of job he'll accept, what sort of law he should go into based on how many hours a week he would have to work and things like that. And that has been one of the most powerful things we've done for our marriage, is see all the work that both of us do as a team effort. Absolutely transformative.
I love that. I think we do send a message at times that family members, it's a competitive thing. Between individuals, and it is team play all the way.
Yep.
Now, I have to say, one of the things that I thought was really cool, you and I both wrote books that, our editors, our publisher were thinking, okay, these are going to be written for, women who are in these particular stages of life and on and on. But I had something really exciting happen. And I have a daughter who is 24, and she got to see your manuscript early. and was so excited because she and I have been having a conversation about the fact that she and a lot of young women that she hangs out with, they're all still single. They're at certain, stages and ages in their careers. They're trying to develop things. All of them want to be very forward thinking and very intentional as they progress, but they're investing so much in their work and they love their work. They got that message as a generation of young women. They're doing work they love. And all of them would like to get married. All of them would like to have families. Jen, I don't know if this is legal or not, but I handed off your manuscript.
Well, we won't tell our publisher.
Okay. I handed off your manuscript to a young woman who does not necessarily fit the demographic you might expect for this book. She devoured it. All of her friends want to read it. And I think it speaks into that place. You're right. I mean, we are pioneering and we need voices to speak into that generation who's watching us going, what are my options? I mean, so if you could speak to that group of young women, what would you say?
Oh, well, first of all, Julie, that you made my year by telling me that. That is so, so exciting, your daughter's reaction to that. And that reminds me of a young woman who spoke to me. I spoke at a youth conference at the beginning of this year, wonderful college students, thousands of them just coming together to grow in their faith. It was a really inspiring thing. But I had more than one woman, and I'm thinking of one in particular, who came up to me and said, I've found this work that I love, and I really feel like these are the gifts that God has given me, and I see myself having an impact. And she said, I'm dating a guy. It's looking pretty serious. We might get married. And she said, honestly, when I think of family life, and we'd like to have kids sooner rather than later, but she said, honestly, when I imagine that, when I conjure up those images of me as a wife and a mother, on the one hand, I want to be a wife and a mother. I love these ideas. But she said, on the other hand, these images are tinged with a sense of mourning, that especially if we go on to, have more than one or two kids, she said that, I guess that means that I just have to retire everything I'm doing. And, this work that I'm doing is getting traction. She's working with a great charity, and she is making a difference for Christ in the world. And she said, I feel a sense of mourning when I think of letting all that go when I become a wife and a mother. And I wanted to shake her by the shoulders and said, you do not assume that you have to let that go. I mean, like we said, God has a different call for every person. Some women do decide that my work is stressing me out. This is not beneficial. Need to set it aside when I become a mother. But that is not a given. And you should not. It makes me sad that this generation of young Christian women do sometimes think of being married and having kids with a sense of mourning because they've found work that inspires them and just ignites their passions. And they just assume that it's time to pack that up in a box and put it on the shelf. And you don't get to take that box down until your youngest child is in school when at age 5. And I want to just shatter that and say, God is so much bigger than that. Do we have a God of teeny tiny confining boxes? No, we don't. And if he has called you to something and it's inspiring you, very likely you are going to find a way to continue to use those gifts, and that will be your call, even when you're married with kids.
I love that. I think that's so inspirational for this generation of women that we're trying to cut a path for them, and a path that they can see and has clarity. And so, I love that takeaway of saying, look, here's what's so cool. We're walking into a realization that there's so many options.
Yeah.
And it can all be good.
Yes.
It's just about listening well. And you know what? The core of it is still the same as it's always been for women in Christ. We submit our lives.
Yep.
But the cool thing is, it doesn't have to be to a cultural template that maybe we've assumed we just had to take on so that we could be, quote unquote, good moms and good wives only in this lane. And so I am so excited for your new book to come out, One Beautiful Dream from HarperCollins Zondervan. Jen Fulwiler, it's always just so much fun to be with you. And I can't wait to see what this book is going to do on the world.
Julie, I am just so excited. You are doing amazing work as well. And it's really been an honor to chat with you today.
Well, that is my one beautiful friend, Jennifer Fulwiler, and we are so excited to celebrate her new book, One Beautiful Dream. You'll find it wherever books are sold. Be sure and connect with Jen at Jennifer Fulwiler. That's Jennifer, and then Fulwiler is FULWILER.com. You'll find on her website her social media handles. You definitely want to check her out, Instagram, Twitter, all the places. She's so much fun. And so be sure and check that out. Also, for more conversation from Jen, she's on SiriusXM every day for a couple of hours with her live radio show, The Jennifer Fulwiler Show. You're definitely going to tune in and listen to that as well. I'd love to connect with you on the socials too. You can find me at Julie Lyles Carr, and that's on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the places. And so I would love to see you there. A big shout out to Donna Toti. She is our producer, and Rebecca Beckett, our content coordinator. They are the ones that we need to give a standing ovation to for making the Modern Motherhood Podcast possible every week. Also, check out All Mom Does. All Mom Does is a blog. It's different information and encouragement on the socials. All Mom Does is a community of moms who are all seeking to encourage and empower one another. You want to make sure that you're plugged in there. Next week, okay, it's going to be pretty amazing. We might even just be cousins. I'm going to have on as my guest Mo Isom. And we're going to have one of those conversations that sometimes in circles of faith, we're a little hesitant to have. Kind of the conversations that the church forgot. That's right, Mo Isom. You don't want to miss this one on the next episode of the Modern Motherhood Podcast.